Hi, ABL followers. This is Galia Aharoni. I am the founding attorney at Aharoni Business Law, where we do business, employment, and intellectual property law for small business owners. So we can help small business owners protect themselves and their families and their assets by drafting personalized documents that minimize liability for you and prevent lawsuits in the future. So one of the main questions we get in our line of work is what type of entity your company should be. So whether you're starting up from scratch or whether you've been in business for a while but are wondering if your current entity type is still best for you, this is a question that comes up a lot and should be asked every once in a while. So before we even get into the separate entity types, though, we need to talk about limited liability and whether you need limited liability. So what is limited liability? Basically, if you don't have limited liability, like if you're something like a sole proprietorship or a general partnership, and your company were to get sued, then that means that the person suing you can come after all of your personal assets. So personal assets, that means things like your house and your car and your kids' college funds and anything you have in the bank is up for grabs, basically. If you get sued, the person suing you can try to go after any of those assets as an award for if they win the lawsuit, which can be a really big deal and a really big downside of owning a business, right? If you do have limited liability, for example, you have a LLC or a corporation, or a limited liability partnership, for example, and you're running your business correctly, then if somebody sues you, they can only go after the assets that the company owns. So again, they can't come after your house or your car or your kids' college funds. They can only go after whatever the company owns and whatever is in the company bank accounts. So that can give you a lot of protection. So when we're trying to decide whether a business owner needs limited liability, there are three questions we ask them. So first question is, what is the risk involved in your business? So, you know, low risk companies are going to be, the kind of people who maybe they're just working from home in their pajamas and they don't have any employees. And so they're doing, web design or something like that for people. They're not having clients come into an office. They're not dealing with sensitive information. They don't have employees. The risk of lawsuit is going to be pretty low, right? Like the chance of somebody getting hurt is really low. The chances of somebody suing you for, discrimination or negligence or anything like that are going to be a lot lower. So the flip side of that is if you're dealing with kids or you're dealing with pets or you're dealing with machinery, or if you have even a single employee, the risk of something going wrong skyrockets, right? So the risk of somebody getting hurt or even dying in some situations, or the risk of something going wrong with a project can be really bad. And just having employees increases your potential liability risk a lot because employees, it really increases the likelihood of you getting sued for harassment, discrimination, retaliation, things like that. Even if you're not doing it on purpose, sometimes it happens and you get sued by accidentally, breaching employment laws, which are really complicated. So low risk versus high risk is going to be kind of a case by case basis, depending on you and your business and what you're doing and how you're interacting with your clients and your vendors. So the higher the risk, the more likely you're going to want limited liability because the more likely it might be that you're going to get sued and then want to protect your personal assets, right? So the second question is, what are your personal assets? So sometimes we see people with, fairly high risk, but they're like, I don't have anything. I don't have anything in the bank. I don't own a house. I don't have any kids. I don't need to worry about it. Let them sue me. They're not going to get anything anyway. And that's a personal choice. If that's something that you feel like you don't need because you don't have a lot of assets, then that's totally fair. On the other hand, if you have a lot of personal assets that you want to protect, your spouse's assets, first of all, because if you have community property in California with your spouse, then your spouse's assets might be up for grabs as well, which can be a really big deal. And if you have, again, a house, if you have you got an inheritance from a relative who passed away, all of those things, the more you have, and just your retirement savings, all of those things, the more you have, the more you're going to want to protect it. So if you have kids, if you have a family, if you have a house, if you're a little bit older and it's more important for you to be saving for retirement, it's going to be more important to have that limited liability in place versus if you're, maybe in your 20s and don't have very many assets yet, it's going to be a lower risk. and you might not need that limited liability as much. So the third question here really is, what is your risk tolerance? Because some people, will be high risk, higher assets, but say, you know what, I'm comfortable with a little bit of risk. I don't really want to deal with having to upkeep an LLC or a corporation. So I'm just going to take the risk and not have limited liability. And while I don't recommend that, that's your decision. And if you're really comfortable with that, and you're willing to take that risk, then it's up to you to to take that risk. Some people are on the other side of the spectrum where even if they have very low risk and very few assets, they're like, it's going to help me sleep at night if I know that I have this limited liability in place. And sometime in the future, I'm going to have assets and I'm going to want to make sure that those are protected from the get-go. So that's also a totally reasonable philosophy and a totally reasonable way to go. We are lawyers. We have seen the worst of everything happen, and we can see clearly how many things can go wrong and how often they do go wrong. So we tend to be risk averse, and we do tend to err on the side of forming a limited liability company if there's really any risk at all, because we can just see how badly it can go wrong. But again, it's up to you based on your risk and your assets and your risk tolerance, and talking to a lawyer can really help figure out which is best for you. So now that we know more about limited liability, I encourage you to check out our other videos and check out our blog as well for more information on the different types of entities like sole proprietorships, general partnerships, LLCs, and corporations, and figure out which one is the best for you, whether you're going to have limited liability or not. And I welcome you to call us to help figure out if a limited liability entity is best for you. And from there, we can help you figure out what type of entity you should be as well. So thank you for tuning in. It was a pleasure talking to you. Check back again soon.